So here's the thing about the Galactic Council's annual intimidation competition. It's less of a competition and more of a excuse for various warlords and dictators to wave their appendages around and prove who's got the scariest nightmare fuel in their arsenal. Think of it as a really aggressive dog show, except the dogs are the size of shuttlecraft and have a taste for sentient flesh. This particular year, the reigning champion was Beastmaster Krell, and let me tell you, this guy was exactly what you'd picture if someone said, terrifying alien warlord. 8 feet tall, scales that looked like they could deflect plasma rounds, and a voice that sounded like gravel being processed through a meat grinder. He'd won the competition for 6 consecutive years, and his ego was roughly the size of a small moon. Krell had brought his latest masterpiece, the Void Ripper. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know. But let me paint you a picture. Imagine if someone took a shark, crossed it with a bear, added some scorpion DNA for fun, and then gave it anger management issues. This thing had claws that could shred reinforced hull plating, 3 rows of teeth that regenerated daily, and eyes that glowed with what the brochure called pure, concentrated malice. The creature sat in its reinforced containment cage at the center of the council chamber, snarling and rattling the bars hard enough to make the nearby ambassadors reconsider their seating arrangements. Its cage was labeled with 17 different warning signs in 43 languages. The most recent edition read, "Seriously though, don't." Krell stood beside his beast with the kind of smug satisfaction usually reserved for people who've just won an argument on the internet. "I am willing to wager my entire fleet," he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, "that no species represented here can approach the Void Ripper and survive contact for longer than 30 seconds. Any takers?" The council chamber fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming the pin wasn't immediately atomized by the tension in the room. That's when Dave Thompson raised his hand. Now, Dave wasn't supposed to be at this meeting. He was a maintenance technician, 3rd class, who'd only wandered into the council chamber because he'd gotten turned around looking for the bathroom. But there he was, wearing a jumpsuit with Earth Station 7 printed on the back, holding a half-eaten sandwich in one hand, and volunteering to pet the galactic equivalent of a wood chipper with teeth. The council president, a floating jellyfish creature named Ambassador Veltros, made a sound that the translator interpreted as deeply concerned gurgling. Human representative. You understand the terms? Physical contact with the Void Ripper for 30 seconds. No protective equipment. No weapons. Dave swallowed his bite of sandwich. "Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Does this count as my lunch break, or should I clock out first?" Krell's eyes narrowed, which was impressive considering he had 3 of them. "You mock me, human?" No, Dave said, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "Genuine question. HR gets weird about overtime." The Beastmaster studied Dave like he was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate human trick. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 18 months ago, and their reputation was already a mixed bag of surprisingly competent and why did they try to adopt that radioactive slime creature? Krell made what might have been a smile, revealing far too many teeth. "Very well, human. Approach my Void Ripper. Let us see how long your species' arrogance sustains you before you are torn limb from limb." Dave handed his sandwich to a nearby counselor who looked like a nervous praying mantis. "Hold this, would you?" "Thanks, buddy." The entire council chamber leaned forward in their seats. Betting pools were forming in real time. The odds on Dave surviving were currently sitting at 3,000 to 1 against, and those were the optimistic numbers. Dave cracked his knuckles and started walking toward the cage where the Void Ripper was making sounds that the translator was rendering as creative threats against your genetic lineage. Ambassador Veltros activated the recording systems. Someone had to document this for the inevitable human stupidity archive. The challenge had begun. Dave walked toward the cage with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for people heading to the break room for coffee. Not the, "I'm secretly terrified but hiding it" walk. Not the, "I've made peace with my mortality" walk. Just a regular Tuesday afternoon kind of stroll. The Void Ripper, naturally, took this personally. The creature slammed against the cage bars with enough force to leave dents in the reinforced durasteel. Its claws scraped against the metal, producing a sound that made several council members reach for emergency earplugs. The snarling intensified to levels that the translator just gave up on and displayed as aggressive nonverbal communication with hostile intent. Krell positioned himself nearby, arms crossed, clearly ready to enjoy the show. "Human, before you proceed to your demise, allow me to educate you on what you face." The Void Ripper has 15 documented killing methods, 12 of which are considered war crimes in civilized space. It has never been touched by sentient hands without causing immediate casualties. It was bred specifically to hate all forms of life, trust nothing, and respond to kindness with extreme prejudice. Uh-huh, Dave said, still walking. It can detect fear through pheromone analysis, Krell continued, warming to his subject. It interprets any approach as a challenge to combat. Its reflexes are 40 times faster than the average humanoid species. In short, human, you are about to become a cautionary tale. Dave stopped about 10 feet from the cage. The Void Ripper pressed its face against the bars, eyes locked on him, making a low rumbling sound that felt less like a growl and more like a promise of violence. Quick question, Dave said, turning to Krell. Has he had breakfast? Krell blinked. All three eyes, in sequence. What? Breakfast. You know, morning meal. Most important meal of the day and all that. I fail to see the relevance of... Because in my experience, Dave interrupted, when something's acting all cranky and aggressive, it usually means one of three things. Either they're hungry, they're tired, or they need to go outside. Sometimes all three. The council chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Ambassador Veltros's tentacles twitched nervously. The human appears to be treating the Void Ripper as though it were a domesticated companion animal. Yeah, I caught that too, whispered a reptilian counselor. Should we stop him? I mean, probably, Veltros replied. But I'm also really curious about what happens next. Krell looked genuinely insulted. The Void Ripper is not cranky. It is a precision instrument of terror and death. It does not need to go outside. Everybody needs to go outside sometimes, Dave said reasonably. Fresh air, little exercise, maybe chase a ball around. It's good for mental health. It does not have mental health. It has killing instincts. Okay, but hear me out, Dave said, taking another step toward the cage. Have you tried, being nice to it? Krell made a sound that the translator rendered as outraged spluttering. Being nice? To a Void Ripper? That is not how apex predators function, you ignorant. Right, Dave said, waving him off. Apex predators. Super scary. Got it. He looked at the Void Ripper, who was still snarling and displaying what could generously be called its entire dental collection. But have you actually tried? If I attempted to show affection to the Void Ripper, it would remove my arm at the shoulder socket. Yeah, but did you try though? Krell looked ready to remove Dave's arm at the shoulder socket himself. The cage will open in 10 seconds, human. I suggest you prepare yourself for excruciating pain. Dave shrugged. Cool. Hey, one more thing. Does he have a favorite spot? Like behind the ears or under the chin or anything? It does not have a favorite spot. Okay, but if it did, it exists only to kill. Sure, but theoretically. 10 seconds, human. Dave turned back to the cage. The Void Ripper had stopped snarling just long enough to tilt its head slightly, as if trying to figure out why this particular prey item wouldn't stop talking. Ambassador Veltros updated the betting pools. Dave's survival odds had dropped to 5,000 to 1. Someone had opened a side bet on whether Dave would say something stupid in his final words. That one was paying out at even money. Krell raised his clawed hand and placed it on the cage release mechanism. Any last words, human? Dave looked at the Void Ripper and smiled. Who's a good boy? The translator struggled with that one for a solid 3 seconds before displaying query, identification of exemplary male specimen. Krell hit the release. The cage door swung open, and the Void Ripper lunged. The Void Ripper exploded out of the cage like a missile made of teeth and bad decisions. Its claws extended, its jaws opened wide enough to fit Dave's entire head inside, and it covered the distance between them in roughly 0.3 seconds. Dave didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't even blink. Instead, he dropped to one knee, made a weird clicking sound with his tongue that sounded vaguely like ch-ch-ch-ch, and held out his hand at chest level, palm down. The Void Ripper stopped, mid-lunge, just completely froze in mid-air like someone had hit pause on the universe's most violent nature documentary. It landed about 2 feet in front of Dave, claws scrabbling on the polished chamber floor, and stared at him with the kind of confusion usually reserved for advanced mathematics students encountering their first calculus problem. Yeah, that's what I thought, Dave said in that voice. You know the voice. That high-pitched, baby talk. Everything is adorable voice that humans use when they encounter literally anything with fur, scales, or feathers. Who's a good apex predator? Is it you? I think it's you. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. The Void Ripper's head tilted approximately 45 degrees to the left. Its snarling had stopped. The translator was now rendering its sounds as profoundly confused, growling with undertones of what the hell is happening. Krell stood frozen, his hands still on the cage release, his three eyes wider than they'd probably ever been in his entire military career. Dave slowly extended his hand toward the creature's head. Okay, buddy. Let's see if we can find that spot. Every predator's got a spot. It's just science. That is not science, Krell managed to croak. That is suicide. Tomato, Dave said, moving his hand closer. The Void Ripper watched his fingers approach with the intensity of a cat watching a laser pointer. Now, based on cranial structure, I'm guessing you've got some kind of ear equivalent right about here. His fingers made contact with a ridge behind what might generously be called the creature's auditory sensor. He scratched. The Void Ripper's left rear leg started twitching. Oh, we got it, Dave said, grinning. That's the spot, isn't it? Yeah, that's the spot. The creature's eyes, which had been glowing with malevolent energy 30 seconds ago, started to glaze over slightly. Its mouth, still open, began to close. Its tail, which had been lashing back and forth like a serrated whip, started to slow down. Ambassador Veltros made a sound that the translator couldn't even process. It just displayed a series of question marks. This is impossible, Krell said, his voice barely above a whisper. The Void Ripper does not experience pleasure. It does not have neurological pathways for positive reinforcement. I specifically removed those genes. Well, buddy, Dave said, still scratching. Nature finds a way. Or in this case, I found the way. Same difference. He looked at the Void Ripper, whose rear leg was now thumping against the floor in rhythm with the scratching. Who's got their brains scrambled by ear scratches? You do. You absolutely do. The creature made a sound. Not a growl. Not a snarl. The translator struggled for a moment, then displayed contentment vocalization, comparable to feline purring. No, Krell said. No, that is not possible. Void Rippers do not purr. This one does, Dave said cheerfully. Then, because apparently he'd decided that surviving the next 30 seconds wasn't exciting enough, he moved his hand. Now let's see about that belly situation. Do not, Krell started. Too late. Dave's hand went to the Void Ripper's chest and applied gentle pressure. Down. Come on, buddy. Show me that belly. The creature, the most feared predator in 12 star systems, the thing that had 17 warning labels and a history of consuming its previous handlers, looked up at Dave with eyes that had gone from concentrated malice to slightly confused but kind of into this. And then it rolled over. Just flopped right onto its back, all 6 legs in the air, exposing its vulnerable underbelly to a species it had never encountered before. Dave immediately started administering belly rubs with both hands. Oh, who's a good death machine? Who's the best murder monster in the whole galaxy? You are. Yes, you are. The Void Ripper's tail wagged. Actually wagged. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Half the ambassadors were screaming. A quarter were frantically updating xenobiological databases. The rest were just staring in stunned silence, trying to process what their eyes were telling them versus what their brains insisted was possible. Krell stumbled backward, bumped into the empty cage, and slowly slid down to a sitting position. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence, over and over, like a computer trying to reboot after encountering a fatal error. Dave looked up at the chamber, still rubbing the Void Ripper's belly, his face the picture of innocent confusion. What? Did I win? The Void Ripper's tongue lolled out of its mouth. Ambassador Veltros quietly updated the betting pools. Dave's survival odds were no longer tracked because he'd somehow transcended the concept of survival and entered territory that xenobiologists didn't have terminology for yet. The 30-second timer had stopped at 45 seconds and counting. Nobody had noticed. Nobody cared. They were too busy watching a maintenance technician 3rd class give tummy rubs to a weapon of mass destruction. Krell finally found his voice, though it came out about 3 octaves higher than usual. Explain! Explain this immediately! Dave looked up from where he was still administering industrial-grade belly rubs to the happily prone Void Ripper. Explain what? That! Krell gestured wildly at the scene before him. My Void Ripper. My unstoppable killing machine. My genetically engineered nightmare creature. It is currently receiving abdominal stimulation and appears to be enjoying it. "Oh, yeah," Dave said. Like this was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's just basic pack bonding. Happens all the time with humans." Ambassador Veltros floated closer, tentacles twitching with scientific curiosity. "Pack bonding? Please elaborate, Human Dave." "Okay, so here's the thing," Dave said, switching to a two-handed scratching technique that made the Void Ripper's rear leg thump even harder. "Humans have this evolutionary quirk. About 10,000 years ago, we looked at wolves, apex predators, dangerous hunters, definitely could kill us, and we collectively decided, I'm gonna pet that." "That seems inadvisable," Veltros observed. "Oh, it absolutely was," Dave agreed cheerfully. "But we did it anyway. And then we spent the next several millennia turning wolves into pugs. You know what a pug is?" The council members shook their heads in unison. "Imagine taking an apex predator and selectively breeding it until it can't breathe properly and looks like it ran face first into a wall. On purpose. For fun." Dave grinned. "We did that to wolves. We also did it to wildcats. Turned them into lap warmers that knock stuff off tables for entertainment. We domesticated horses, which could kick our heads clean off. We befriended elephants. We taught dolphins tricks. We put sweaters on chickens." "Why would you put sweaters on chickens?" asked a confused counselor, who resembled a crystalline rock formation. "Because they looked cold and sad, Gary," Dave said, apparently deciding that this counselor's name was now Gary. "Keep up." Krell pulled himself to his feet, scales rattling. "This is absurd. The Void Ripper was engineered to resist manipulation. Its aggression protocols are hardwired at the genetic level." Sure, Dave said, nodding. "But here's what you didn't account for. Humans have a documented medical condition where we see something that could absolutely kill us, and our first thought is, but what if I could be friends with it? We call it cute aggression, except in reverse. It's basically a death wish wrapped in optimism and poor decision-making skills." He gestured to the still purring Void Ripper. "This guy right here? He's got eyes. He's got a face-adjacent area. He responds to physical stimulation. That's basically all the criteria humans need to initiate Operation Who's a Good Boy." Ambassador Veltros was taking frantic notes. "Fascinating. So you are saying that humans possess an instinctive drive to form emotional bonds with predatory species?" "We possess an instinctive drive to form emotional bonds with literally anything," Dave corrected. "Roomba vacuum cleaners. Rocks. That one fern in accounting that's been dead for 3 weeks, but nobody's thrown it out because we're emotionally invested. If it exists, we will pack bond with it. It's a problem." "It certainly appears to be," Veltros agreed. The Void Ripper chose that moment to roll slightly to one side, clearly requesting that Dave focus his attention on a different section of belly. Dave obliged immediately. "See? Communication," Dave said. "He knows what he wants, and he's asking for it. That's trust right there." Krell looked like he was having a religious crisis. "I spent 17 cycles breeding the perfect weapon. 17 cycles. I eliminated all social behaviors. I removed pack instincts. I created a creature that trusts nothing and no one." "Yeah, but you didn't account for the human factor," Dave said. "We don't need the creature to trust. We just need to find the magic spot that makes the leg go thump-thump. Everything else follows from there." "This is a security threat," announced a counselor who looked like an angry crab. "If humans can simply bypass all aggression protocols in military-grade organisms through, what did you call it? Scritches? Then humanity represents a massive tactical advantage." "Or liability," another counselor countered. "Depends on whether they're on your side or trying to adopt your security forces." Dave held up a finger. "Quick clarification. We're definitely going to try to adopt your security forces. That's just gonna happen. You should prepare for that emotionally." The council chamber burst into worried murmuring. Several ambassadors were already on their communication devices, presumably warning their home worlds about the human threat. Krell stepped closer to Dave, looming over him with what was probably meant to be an intimidating presence. "You claim this is natural human behavior. Prove it. The Void Ripper is uniquely bioengineered. Surely this is coincidence." Dave looked up at the towering warlord and smiled. "You want me to prove that humans can domesticate anything?" "Yes." "Okay." Dave stood up, causing the Void Ripper to make a disappointed sound. He turned to face the council. "Anybody here got something dangerous I can pet? Like really dangerous? War beast, security drone, carnivorous plant, whatever. I'm not picky." Approximately 15 hands, Claws, tentacles, and appendages shot into the air. "Yeah," Dave said, brushing dust off his jumpsuit. "That's what I thought." Dave surveyed the eager crowd of council members, all suddenly very interested in having their deadly creatures tested against human domestication protocols. All right, one at a time. Let's not turn this into a petting zoo. Yet." He pointed at the Void Ripper, who was still lying on its back, looking mildly betrayed that the belly rubs had stopped. "But first, let me show you something else about pack bonding. See, it's not just about the scritches. It's about establishing trust and communication." Dave knelt down next to the Void Ripper and looked directly into its eyes. "Okay, buddy, sit." The creature stared at him. "Sit," Dave repeated, patting his knee. The Void Ripper tilted its head, then slowly rolled over and sat. Its tail swept across the floor behind it. The council gasped. "Good boy," Dave said, reaching into his jumpsuit pocket. He pulled out a protein bar, broke off a piece, and tossed it. The Void Ripper caught it mid-air and swallowed. "See? Positive reinforcement. Basic training stuff." Krell's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "It took me 3 years to teach it to return to its cage. You taught it a command in 15 seconds. Different teaching methods," Dave said with a shrug. He stood up and looked around the chamber. "Okay, I need something to throw. Something that won't break." Ambassador Veltros hesitantly offered up a ceremonial staff, an ornate golden rod about 3 feet long that apparently symbolized the council's authority or something equally important. "Perfect," Dave said, taking it. Several councilors made sounds of protest, but Veltros waved them off with a tentacle. Dave held up the staff so the Void Ripper could see it. The creature's eyes locked onto it with laser focus. "You want this? You want the stick?" The Void Ripper's tail wagged faster. "Go get it!" Dave hurled the staff across the chamber. It clattered across the polished floor, bounced off a wall, and came to rest near the main entrance. The Void Ripper took off like a missile, claws scrabbling for purchase, moving so fast it was practically a blur. It grabbed the staff in its jaws, wheeled around, and came sprinting back to Dave, dropping the staff at his feet and sitting immediately, tail wagging so hard its entire back half was wiggling. Dave picked up the staff, now covered in what he hoped was just saliva, and threw it again. "Fetch!" Off went the Void Ripper, pure joy radiating from every movement. "This is humiliating," Krell muttered, watching his ultimate weapon play fetch like an overexcited puppy. "This is worse than death." "Oh, it gets better," Dave said as the Void Ripper returned again. This time, Dave held out his hand. "Paw." The creature looked at his hand, looked at Dave's face, then slowly extended one massive claw-tipped limb and placed it in Dave's palm. "Excellent. Other paw." The Void Ripper complied. The council was now openly staring, several members with their mouths hanging open in whatever anatomical configuration allowed them to express shock. Krell took a step toward the Void Ripper, drawing himself up to his full intimidating height. "Enough of this. Void Ripper, return to me. I am your master. I command you to—" The Void Ripper glanced at Krell, then immediately looked back at Dave, completely ignoring the Beastmaster. Dave threw the staff again. The creature bolted after it without a second thought for its former master. "Oh no," Krell said quietly. "Oh no, this is not happening." "It's definitely happening," Dave confirmed. He caught the staff when the Void Ripper returned and held it up. "See, the thing about pack bonding is that it's a two-way street. He's bonded with me now. I'm his person. That's just how it works." Krell tried again, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Void Ripper. Attack Protocol 7. Defensive Posture 9. Literally anything I have ever trained you to do." The Void Ripper was too busy watching the staff in Dave's hand to pay attention. Ambassador Veltros floated forward, scientific curiosity apparently overriding common sense. "Human Dave, you mentioned other council members have dangerous creatures. Would you be willing to demonstrate this ability with additional specimens?" "Oh, absolutely," Dave said. "Who's next?" A nervous-looking ambassador who resembled a bipedal gecko raised a clawed hand. "I have a Screechwing. It is currently secured in the auxiliary bay. It has bitten off the fingers of 3 handlers and is considered untrainable." "Bring it out," Dave said confidently. "I must warn you, it is highly aggressive toward—" Yeah, highly aggressive, very dangerous, I get it. Bring out the bird." 10 minutes later, the Screechwing, a creature that looked like someone had crossed a pterodactyl with a chainsaw, and given it anger issues, was perched on Dave's shoulder, making cooing sounds while he scratched under its chin. "Who's next?" Dave asked. A slug-like ambassador offered up their photosynthetic terror vine, which was apparently carnivorous and had consumed 2 gardening crews. Dave found the spot where its leaves connected to the main stalk and gave it a little massage. The vine practically melted, draping itself over Dave's arm like a content snake. The crystalline Counselor Gary brought out something called a plasma hound, which apparently breathed ionized gas and had a bite force that could crush titanium. Dave played tug-of-war with it using a piece of reinforced cable. The hound won, but only because Dave let it, and then it rolled over for belly rubs just like the Void Ripper. An hour into the impromptu demonstration, Dave was surrounded by approximately 7 different deadly creatures, all of which were either sleeping contentedly at his feet, perched on various parts of his body, or waiting patiently for their turn to receive attention. Krell had slumped against the wall, his reputation in ruins, watching his life's work play fetch with a human maintenance technician. Ambassador Veltros called for order, which took several minutes given that half the council was too busy taking pictures of Dave with their murder beasts. "We must put this to a vote. Clearly, humanity represents a unique situation that requires classification. I propose Class 12 species designation," announced an ambassador. "Friendly but concerning." The vote was unanimous. Dave raised his hand, currently occupied by a sleeping Void Ripper who'd worn himself out. "Quick question. Does the Void Ripper have a name? Because I can't keep calling him the Void Ripper. That's weird." Krell looked at him with dead eyes. "It does not have a name. It is a weapon." "Cool, I'm calling him Kevin," Dave decided. Kevin the Void Ripper purred in his sleep. The motion passed.
1 week later, the galaxy had adjusted to its new reality approximately as well as you'd expect, which is to say not at all. Dave had been promoted, though promoted might be the wrong word. The official title was Galactic Ambassador of Interspecies Relations, which sounded impressive until you realized it was a position created specifically to keep him away from military operations, tactical planning sessions, and anywhere that important security decisions were being made. Basically, they'd given him a fancy title that translated to, "Please stop adopting our weapons systems." The promotion came with an office, which Dave had immediately filled with various creature beds, food bowls, and what he called enrichment toys. The council had approved the office setup primarily because it meant all the formerly terrifying creatures were contained in one location instead of wandering the station trying to figure out where their new human friend had gone. Kevin, formerly known as the Void Ripper, had officially been transferred to Dave's care after Krell signed the release paperwork with shaking hands. The creature now wore a collar, because Dave had insisted, and the collar had a tag that read, "Emotional Support Apex Predator," in 7 different languages. Kevin seemed perfectly content with this arrangement, and could frequently be found sleeping under Dave's desk or following him around the station like an oversized, heavily armed puppy. Krell, for his part, had experienced what the council medical staff called a complete professional identity crisis. His entire career had been built on breeding the most terrifying creatures in known space, and watching them all turn into cuddly companions the moment a human showed up had apparently broken something fundamental in his worldview. However, after approximately 3 days of sitting in the dark questioning his life choices, Krell had emerged with a new business plan. He'd rebranded himself as a therapeutic animal specialist and was now breeding creatures specifically designed to respond positively to emotional support training. His first product line, somewhat less terrifying companions, was already getting interest from several core worlds looking to improve mental health services. His advertising slogan was, "If a human can domesticate it, so can you." Sales were surprisingly strong. The council had implemented new regulations naturally. The official documentation ran to approximately 400 pages, but the summary version came down to 3 main rules. 1. Humans were not permitted to approach alien fauna without explicit permission and supervision. 2. Humans were definitely not permitted to attempt domestication of military or security creatures. 3. Humans absolutely under no circumstances were allowed to bring phrases like, "Who's a good boy?" within 50 meters of anything classified as a weapon. Dave ignored all 3 rules, obviously. He'd been caught twice trying to pet a security drone, once attempting to teach a combat mech to play dead, and memorably had been found in the ambassadorial garden having a very productive conversation with what turned out to be a carnivorous plant that had previously eaten 4 ambassadors. The plant was now named Gerald and lived in Dave's office, where it received regular fertilizer and what Dave called encouraging words. The other human crew members on the station had quickly caught on to Dave's newfound fame and had started bringing him their domestication problems. "Hey Dave, there's this thing in Cargo Bay 7 that
Keeps trying to eat the dock workers. Can you talk to it?" Became a regular occurrence. Dave's unofficial success rate was sitting at about 93%, with the 7% failure rate being attributed to what he called creatures with legitimate grievances that just needed better working conditions. The galactic community was still debating whether humanity was more dangerous with weapons or without them. A research paper titled "The Domestication Threat: Humanity's Ability to Neutralize Military Assets Through Friendship" had been published and was causing quite a stir in military planning circles. 3 admirals had already retired, citing the paper's findings as evidence that traditional warfare was essentially obsolete if humans could just pet your entire attack force into submission. There was talk of creating an entire department dedicated to studying human pack bonding, with a proposed budget that made the Council's Treasury Department go pale. The preliminary research suggested that humans had successfully domesticated at least 15 previously unkillable species in the past week alone, and the number was climbing daily. Kevin, for his part, had become something of a celebrity. Tourists would specifically visit the council station hoping to catch a glimpse of the good boy formerly known as the Void Ripper. Dave had set up an image gallery feed that showed Kevin doing various adorable things like chasing his tail, playing with oversized toys, and sleeping in positions that seemed anatomically impossible. The feed had 17 million followers. Ambassador Veltros had filed a request to study Dave's brain, citing scientific necessity and morbid curiosity. Dave had politely declined, but had offered to teach a seminar on basic animal communication and why everything deserves a chance. The seminar had a waiting list of 3,000 attendees. Krell had shown up to Dave's office 3 days ago with a proposal. "I want you to consult on my new breeding program," he'd said, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Your expertise in creature emotional states would be invaluable." Dave, sitting at his desk with Kevin's head in his lap, had grinned. "Only if you stop calling them weapons and start calling them friends." Krell had stood there for a solid minute, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence, before finally managing. "Friends? Yes, fine. Whatever helps me salvage my career." They shook on it. Kevin had wagged his tail in approval. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that week, one that would be taught in xenobiology classes for generations to come. It didn't matter how dangerous you made something, how many teeth you gave it, how much genetic engineering you poured into creating the perfect weapon. Because somewhere out there, a human would look at it, tilt their head, and say the 5 words that struck fear into military planners across 12 systems. "I wonder if it likes belly rubs." And just like that, your ultimate weapon became someone's emotional support animal. Kevin stretched in his sleep, made a contented sound that the translator had finally given up trying to interpret, and Dave smiled while filling out paperwork for his latest acquisition, a phase-shifting shadow beast that the council had classified as extremely dangerous and definitely do not approach under any circumstances. Dave had already named it Charles. It was going to be a good week.